Hey friends, how's it going? If you're new here, I just want to say welcome to my little show, Crime and Paint, where I come on here, paint a painting, while I talk about a true crime case. So, if you're like me and you enjoy true crime and maybe a little bit of painting, I would love for you to stick around, maybe like the video, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And if you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for hanging out with me again this week. Today, we're going to be talking about the unsolved murder of Dorothy Scott. Hey guys, before I jump into today's video, I just want to say really quick that this is a true story involving a wonderful woman who had something very horrible happen to her. So if that is something that you think could possibly trigger you or make you feel a certain way, I would suggest maybe skipping this video. And with that, let's jump into Dorothy's story. Dorothy Scott was born in 1948 in Anaheim, California to Vera and Jacob Scott. In 1976, Dorothy gave birth to her son, Sean. Now, Sean's father wasn't in the picture at all. He actually lived in Missouri, which is quite a distance away. So Dorothy basically raised Sean all by herself. In 1980, when Dorothy was 32 and her son Sean was 4 years old, they were living with her aunt in Stanton, California. So Dorothy worked like these crazy shifts from like early morning till late night. And she actually worked at these two shops that her father co-owned. One of them was named the Swinger Psych Shop, and then the other one was Joe's Head Shop. And they were very, like, interesting shops. They were really, like, hippie, lifestyle, druggy, full of music and bright colors. Like, her parents were probably, like, total hippies. The Swingers Psych Shop, in particular, sold a lot of, like, drug paraphernalia, like different things, and then like Joe's was more like music, hang out, chill. They had like a dark like back room to hang out with, maybe like, you know, smoke a little bit, all that kind of fun stuff. It was just a really like chill, colorful, fun place to be in. In like the 60s and 70s, they were extremely popular. Definitely, I think, like, you know, by the 80s, this, like, whole hippie vibe was, like, calming down a little bit, but I'm sure, like, people who like the nostalgia still really like to come to these shops and hang out. So it seemed like Dorothy was really, like, running the show at both of these shops. Like, she would work from, like, the morning to, like, the night, like, every single day. She was, like, really devoted to her job. And luckily, like, her parents lived close to the shop. I mean, they co-owned it, so that's really no surprise. And she would often drop Sean off there. Not often, all the time. She would drop off Sean at their house, and he would stay there with his grandparents, and then she would work all day long. So despite working at one of these, like, hippy-dippy shops, Dorothy was really more of these straight-laced, like, follow-the-rules type of people, which is great for, like, you know, a manager of a store. It's kind of what you want. One of her friends, and I'm saying friends, but, like, this is such a mean thing to say about a friend, but whatever. One of her friends even said that Dorothy was as boring as a phone book, which is kind of weird. And you know what? I don't even think phone books are like that boring. I mean, it could potentially be fun, right? You could call up anyone in the world and have a really awesome conversation. So I don't think phone books are necessarily boring, whoever this friend was. I tried to find who this friend was. If anybody knows who this was, please let me know, because I'm like super rude, right? All of Dorothy's co-workers said that she was super dependable, like just a really great person. Her friends and family all said that she was a wonderful mother, and I don't doubt that at all. I mean, she was working so hard to support her son, you know? She sounds awesome. And being a single mother isn't easy, especially when you have, you know, one income and you're working really hard, and the dad's all the way in Missouri, so he can never, like, you know, watch your son if like something, God forbid, comes up, you know. So she was really just like a hardworking, together woman. She didn't party, she didn't drink, she didn't really date according to everybody in her life. Now this is where things start getting bad for Dorothy. Around the early months of 1980, she starts receiving these really strange phone calls from a guy that she doesn't know. And these calls were super sporadic. Sometimes the caller would be professing his love to her, saying, like, you know, how much he adores her. And then other times he would be saying that he wants to kill her and chop her up and all these really creepy, gross things. He also was definitely stalking her or keeping an eye on her, because he would call her and like tell details about like what she was wearing that day, what she was doing. So these calls were very, very concerning. It got to the point where this guy was like so violent and scary with her on the phone that she went and got like karate lessons, like a total badass, because she was like, I'm gonna defend myself if I have to. She even considered getting a gun for a while, but she was really worried about having like a firearm around Sean, because she's a good mother, and that's definitely something that, you know, you should think about. But honestly, if I was in her position, I'd be like, I need a gun, I need pepper spray, I need all this stuff. I mean, totally badass on her for doing the karate lessons. I don't think I would have even thought of that. I would have been just like, gun please, thank you. And I don't even like guns, but like this guy was like really creepy. One day he even called her and was like, I have a surprise for you, Dorothy. Go look outside. And she did, and when she went outside, she saw a dead rose on her car windshield. Who leaves a dead rose? How, like, did he buy a fresh rose, let it sit for a week, and then put it on her car? Like, what is wrong with you, dude? On the 28th of May, after she dropped off her son with her parents, she went into work early because they were having like this big staff work meeting. And one of her coworkers, Conrad, he was like sweating, he looked really sick and just like awful. And, you know, Dorothy, being like the kind, sweet person that she was really concerned about him, and decided, you know what, I'm gonna take him to the hospital because he looks awful. And one of their other coworkers, Pam, also decided to come along. Before taking Conrad to the hospital, Dorothy really quickly stopped at her parents' house just to let them know what was going on. And while she was there, she had been wearing like a black scarf, and she changed that to a red scarf. This is important later, you'll see. Anyway, so they head to the hospital, and it's a good thing that Dorothy insisted on bringing Conrad into the hospital, because he, like, at first was kind of like, oh no, it's fine, like, I'll get over it, it's probably just like a 24-hour thing. I think we all do that sometimes when we're sick. We're like, oh no, it's probably nothing. But this case, it's really good that she did bring him to the hospital, because he had actually been bitten by a black widow spider. Something to do with the painting I'm doing today. Anyway, so he got bit by this spider, and you know, these bites are super poisonous. Like, since he was an adult, he wouldn't have died, but like these bites can kill children, and the effects of the venom can last for like weeks. So it was really good that he went to the hospital and was getting this taken care of, because he could have been sick for a long time. Conrad ends up staying at the hospital for the rest of the day, and Pam and Dorothy, like the total sweethearts that they are, decide to wait at the hospital for him to get, you know, released. He ends up being released around like 11 p.m. that night. So even though Conrad was, free to go, he still was feeling very weak, very tired. So Dorothy, being the total angel that she was, she decided that she was going to go get the car and then she was going to bring it to the front and pick up Conrad and Pam. So while she went to go do that, Conrad and Pam went and picked up the medication for Conrad, and then they went to the door. This couldn't have took more than like 5 minutes, and they expected, Dorothy to be there because it wasn't like super far away or anything like that. But when they get to the door, she isn't there. So Conrad and Pam waited a little bit at the door, like a few minutes, and then they decided to just head into the parking lot and meet her at the car. When they go into the parking lot, they see her car there, but then it like pulls out and like the high beams turn on and like it's facing directly toward them. And the car starts like driving. So Pam and Conrad like try to wave this car down like, hello, Dorothy, this is us, like where are you going? But this car doesn't slow down or stop and just goes like almost hitting them, right past them, does a sharp turn out of the parking lot, turns the high beams off, and just disappears into the night. Like, I can only imagine what was going on in their minds at this time. So, like, definitely Pam and Conrad were a little shaken and confused at this point, but I think they decided, they did what every person does, where we kind of try to rationalize it, and they were like, okay, maybe something happened with her son, and she had to, like, get out of here super quick. So they end up waiting at the hospital for, like, 2 hours. And when they don't hear from her, they call her parents, and they find out that Dorothy didn't go there either. So now like red flags are going off in their brains and they're like, something's wrong, and they call the police. But big surprise, the police really aren't any help. They call, they explain the situation, but the police are like, she's 32, she's an adult, she can drive anywhere that she wants and go anywhere, so they don't really make a big deal out of it. Unfortunately. I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't. It's like they came to the hospital together, they spent the whole day together. Like, it's weird for someone to just veer out of the parking lot, almost hitting her friends and co-workers. But apparently this didn't trigger any red flags to the police. But then around 9:40 a.m., her 1973 white Toyota station wagon was found in an alley on fire. Now, the police are interested, of course. The station wagon was in an alleyway about 10 miles from where the hospital was, and there wasn't a single sign of Dorothy anywhere in the car or around the car, and they couldn't really find any witnesses either that seen anyone coming or going around that area. About a week after her disappearance, Vera received a very mysterious phone call from a strange man. He asked if she was a relative of Dorothy's, and when Vera said yes, he simply said, "I got her," and hung up the phone. Vera contacted the police immediately, and the police really urged her and Jacob to not really say anything to anyone about these calls. I think they were probably worried about like false information coming forward, or maybe someone even like pretending to be the killer or possibly harassing them. But after a week or so, they were getting really antsy and they just wanted to know what happened to their daughter. So Jacob ends up talking to a local paper. The paper was the Santa Ana Register, and they wrote up this whole article about Dorothy and her disappearance, and they offered a $2,500 reward for any information on what could have possibly happened to Dorothy. Okay, y'all, this is crazy. So the very day this story was published, the editor, Pat Riley, received a call from a mysterious man who said that he killed Dorothy. Okay, give me a quick second. I'm sorry, I'm gonna be looking away from the camera, but I wanna get this completely right. So what he said was, "I killed her. I killed Dorothy Scott. She was my love. I caught her cheating with another man. She denied having someone else. I killed her. The guy on this call, he also knew things that hadn't been in the article. Like, he knew that Conrad had gotten bit by a spider, and he knew that Dorothy had been wearing a black scarf and had changed her scarf to a red one. So it's pretty safe to say that this guy was her stalker and most likely the one who kidnapped her and possibly at this point killed her. He also claimed that him and Dorothy were in a relationship and that she had actually called him a few hours before she had gone missing, which Pam says didn't happen. If you remember, they were like in the hospital all day together, and Pam was like, she never made any phone calls. Like, I mean, I'm sure there's times where like she could have gone to the bathroom or this and that, and maybe she could have made a call then. But honestly, I don't really believe this guy. I think he might have like had that, what's that thing? It's like some people think that they're dating someone or in a relationship with someone when they're actually not. Like, he was very clearly her stalker, and I think he might have fabricated a relationship in his head. I don't really believe that him and Dorothy were involved in any way at all. And Dorothy's friends and family kind of confirmed as much. They really insisted to the police and everybody else that Dorothy wasn't involved with anyone romantically. And I mean, like, she lived with her aunt, she worked at her parents' store. Like, it seemed like she would always be accounted for. And she couldn't just, like, at the drop of a hat go see some mysterious stranger somewhere. So the police at this point really didn't have many leads to go on. They did look into her ex a little bit, Sean's father, but he lived all the way in Missouri and he was easily ruled out. They interviewed a lot of the people that worked at both of the shops multiple times, but Dorothy didn't have any enemies and there was really no one who would want to cause her any harm. They also looked at like sex offenders in the area, other criminals in the area, but there was really no connection between any of them and Dorothy. Dorothy's parents were definitely not the type of people to sit idly by, and they actually contacted some psychics and were trying to find out what could have happened to their daughter themselves. And the detectives were even so desperate that they talked to some psychics as well. They really had no leads and no idea what happened to Dorothy. Over the next 4 years, on most Wednesdays, Vera would still get these calls from this mysterious man who would either like ask for Dorothy or say he got her or other horrible things like that. Like, why torture her parents like this? It's sick. It's so sick. Several times the police tried to trace these calls, but the caller was never on the line long enough for them to be able to. The police also recorded his voice and showed it to, different people, had them listen to see if anybody recognized this guy's voice. But it was clearly like disguised on the phone and nobody recognized it. In 1984, in the month of April, one of those calls from the creeper came in and Jacob was actually home. So he answered the phone and the caller hung up immediately and the call stopped for quite some time. On the 6th of August of that same year, a construction worker on Santa Ana Canyon found the remains of a dog under the ground. He continued digging, and below the dog bones, he found human remains. And with the remains, there was a turquoise ring found and a watch. And this is super, super creepy. Because you see, the watch had stopped at 12:30 a.m. on the 29th of May in 1980, about an hour after Pam and Conrad saw Dorothy's car drive out of the parking lot. On August 14th, using Dorothy's dental records, they were able to positively ID the body as belonging to Dorothy. Her mother was also able to ID the ring found with the body, so it was very clear that this was Dorothy. An autopsy was performed, but unfortunately the cause of death remains undetermined. After the announcement of the remains being found, Dorothy's parents received one final phone call where the man asked where Dorothy was. It's been over 40 years since Dorothy's disappearance, and still we have no idea who took Dorothy. Though there have never been any official suspects, there are theories about who could possibly have taken Dorothy. One of these theories is that she might have been one of the victims of the Golden State Killer. There are a lot of reasons why I don't really think that it was the Golden State Killer. If you disagree with me, I would love to hear about all your theories in the comments below and let me know why you think I'm wrong. But I just don't really think that it fits his MO. Yes, he stalked women, yes, he would call them, but he never professed his love, and I don't know, just Dorothy's stalker seemed to be it seemed very personal. I think that he thought that they were in a relationship, so I don't think it's the Golden State Killer. The police also believed that Dorothy's murder might have been connected to a disappearance that occurred about 2 years after Dorothy's to a woman named Patricia. Patricia disappeared in July of 1982. She had made a phone call saying that her car had broken down, and then later her car was found in a field on fire, and there was not a trace of Patricia anywhere. So that was very similar to Dorothy's disappearance, but unlike with Dorothy's case, Patricia's parents never received any mysterious phone calls from a man or anything like that, so it's really hard to say that there's any connection between these two cases. The final possibility, and the person that Dorothy's son Sean actually suspects is the killer and stalker, is a man named Mike Butler. Mike Butler was a very religious man, and he was well known in the community. But when I say religious, I mean his religious beliefs were different. Some would say maybe he was kind of in a cult. I'm not really one to judge people on their religious beliefs, so I'm just gonna leave it at people said he was in a cult, probably. But, his religious activities aside, that's not really what makes him seem suspicious. What's suspicious is that his sister actually worked with Dorothy at the store for a while, and he worked at a store across the street from them. So he was in close proximity to Dorothy most days. So how the killer always knew what she was wearing or what she was doing or where she was going, this would put Mike in a very good position to be able to do that. And according to some of Mike's acquaintances, he did have this weird obsession with Dorothy, even though it seemed like Dorothy didn't know him at all. So that red flag a little bit. Not enough to say for sure that he did it, but still makes you question things a little bit. Unfortunately, in 2014, Mike passed away, so if he had anything to do with Dorothy's murder, we might never be able to find out. One thing that for so long really confused me about this case was the fact that there were dog bones found above Dorothy's. And I'd always wondered, but I hadn't wondered enough to look into it, I guess. But when I was doing research this time, I was like, I'm gonna look in and see if anybody knows whose dog this was or why the dog was there, because it seems like too much of a coincidence, right? Well, when I was looking at an article, and I'm gonna have the article linked down below so y'all can read it too, but apparently some people will put animal bones above where they bury a person, because that way if the police dogs sniff out the area and the police dig, they'll find the animal bones first and they'll stop there because they think that that's what the police dogs, that's what they think that they were smelling. Can you believe that? That blew my mind. I was like, how do people, these sick people, come up with this stuff? I would never think to do that. I mean, I also would never murder somebody and bury them somewhere, but still, how do you even think of that? And that had me thinking, like, there's so many unsolved cases, and some where, like, they have no idea where the person's body is. And I'm like, how many times have the police dogs, like, sniffed out where the body was? They were digging, they got to the animal bones, and then they just stopped. And then the body was never found. It's so creepy to think about. So that's the unsolved murder of Dorothy Scott. It's been over 40 years, and I just honestly really hope that someday we know for sure what happened to Dorothy. Her family and her, just for justice for her, she deserves that. And if anybody knows anything, or if you have any theories, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to get some more information about this. If you guys have any clue about who it could have been, like, or you think that there's something important that I missed in this case, please let me know. All right, friends, that's it for today. I really hope you enjoyed my painting and the video. So drop a like and a comment. It would be so appreciated. And I'll see you again next week. Bye.